The International Court of Justice has ruled that Israel must act immediately to prevent a genocide in Gaza. It was responding to a case brought by South Africa, which accuses Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The court said that Israel must do more to protect civilians there, but did not grant South Africa's request for a ceasefire. The full case is expected to take years before a final ruling.
That Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The court further considers that Israel must take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Israel must also take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Genocide Convention against members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
And let's get more. We are joined by DW's Tania Krämer in Jerusalem. So what's the reaction in Israel?
Well, there just has been a statement now. It's a Friday afternoon. The country goes into the weekend. So we've been just hearing from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He gave a statement. So let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's Prime Minister, never again. Israel will continue to defend itself against Hamas.
Well, he also spoke about that Israel will continue to provide or make it possible for humanitarian aid. But he said in this statement, that it was the charge was rejected. That is certainly not what most people would read into it. Of course, the ICJ has stopped short of ordering provisional measures pertaining to a ceasefire, but it has said it's seen merits in the case. So this case will continue. Of course, this could take many years for a final ruling, but it has ordered Israel to implement provisional measures, among them to ensure, of not killing or causing bodily harm to Palestinians, but also to ensure to provide the basic needs of Palestinians. Now, in the statement, as I said, Prime Minister Netanyahu continues in saying they're doing so, but the question is, will they change course in anything? Will they also comply to another measure it needs to implement to report back to the court in a month's time? There will certainly be more pressure also by Israel's allies so that Israel will comply to these measures. And on the ground, of course, there's also the question now, while Palestinians are saying in reactions at least some accountability when it comes to Israel's actions. Of course, what does it mean for Palestinians in Gaza, for the civilian population there? Will it change anything for them on the ground? And we've been hearing in this hearing, the very detailed description of a very dire situation for Palestinians in Gaza. And with the winter, with the really cold coming into the region, it's still to see what it will change for them right now on the ground.
Tania Krämer with The View from Jerusalem. Thank you so much. And we have The View from Johannesburg, where DW correspondent Dianne Hawker is standing by. What's the reaction where you are?
Well, the initial reaction has actually come from South Africa's International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, who was speaking on the steps of The Hague. She went to the court to hear the outcome. And one of the things she said was that she was thankful to the court for dealing with this matter expeditiously. Let's listen to what else she had to say.
I believe that in exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work. I would have wanted a ceasefire. There's no way that I'm going to say I'm disappointed. I hoped for it, but the fact of delivering humanitarian aid, the fact of taking measures that reduce the levels of harm against persons who have no role in what Israel is combating, for me, requires a ceasefire.
Now, the minister speaking there after her department put out a statement in which it said that the decision at the ICJ was a resounding victory for South Africa. We're also expecting to hear from South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was amongst ANC delegates who were attending an ANC leadership meeting today. We've seen videos on social media showing ANC party members, many of whom are members of government, rejoicing with this outcome, singing struggle songs and saying that this was a resounding victory for the ANC-led government. I think from the perspective of many South Africans, this ruling is a very positive ruling. We know that in South Africa, particularly in the major cities, there have been regular protests in support of the people of Palestine. And of course, there is a feeling amongst many South Africans that there is a connection between South Africa and the Palestinian territories, one that was fostered and nurtured by our former President Nelson Mandela, and one that many South Africans have taken on to this day, feeling that there's a need for us to speak up and feeling that there's a need for the South African government to act when it sees wrongdoing. What the decision will mean in practical terms, we'll still have to see. Of course, there's still the issue of the report that will have to be submitted, and it does seem like it will be a long, continuous legal battle that South Africa will be involved in, receiving those reports from the ICJ and then responding and commenting on them. But for the most part, the feeling in South Africa is one of happiness, one that South Africa has done the right thing and that it has achieved an international victory, speaking up on behalf of those who are disenfranchised.
DW's Dianne Hawker in Johannesburg. Thank you. And let's get more with Marco Longobardo. He is a reader in international law at the University of Westminster. Good to have you with us. Does the ruling come as a surprise to you?
Thank you. No, the ruling didn't come as a surprise. I think it's a clear victory for South Africa, who obtained an order on provisional measures that recognize that there is a serious risk of a genocide in the Gaza Strip. It would have been quite unlikely to obtain an order on ceasefire because the court, in this case, has only jurisdiction over genocide. And the use of force by Israel is not strictly linked to a genocide claim. So the court exercised.
Right. So, sorry to interrupt you there. But people are just looking at the face of it here, and perhaps some people were expecting whether or not we were going to get a verdict on a ceasefire today. The court did not order to halt Israel's military action in Gaza. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already said that Israel will not stop its offensive in Gaza. So what good is the verdict then? Can you just break it down for us a bit?
Yes, the verdict wasn't on whether Israel has committed or not a genocide in Gaza. It was about the risk that during the legal proceedings that are ongoing to establish this, the rights of the Gazan population would have been affected through a genocide. And so the court ordered some measures to protect the rights of the Gazan population pending the judgment. One of the measures that was requested was the ceasefire. The court decided to give more discretion to Israel to comply with the order, not committing a genocide, preventing genocide, without spelling out a duty to cease their military operations. Clearly, if Israel decides to stop the military operation, that would be the best and quickest way to protect the rights of the Palestinian population. But the court didn't go that far because its jurisdiction on this case was limited to the genocide question.
One thing that the court did do, it did establish that it had jurisdiction to hear this case. We know that Israel's attorneys had, basically motioned to have it thrown out. And now this interim ruling is part of a larger case, as you highlighted there, brought by South Africa accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. So can you just walk us through the step-by-step process? Because we obviously did not have a ruling on that today. So what sort of timetable are we looking at? What can we expect now in the next years?
Yes, the case will be quite long. It's based on the Genocide Convention. And it's about Israel committing genocide in Gaza, Israel not preventing genocide from being committed, Israel not punishing people responsible for genocide, and Israel not addressing incitement. So it's a complex case. The next steps would be the merits phase. It is quite likely that Israel will decide to challenge the jurisdiction of the court. We have to remember that today the jurisdiction was only found as a preliminary ruling on an emergent issue, the interim measures. But we could expect a stage on whether really there is jurisdiction by the court. I think the jurisdiction is quite sound. And then a longer merit stage. Consider that the two completed genocide cases before the court that we had so far lasted one 14 and the other 16 years. So a very long proceedings. And because of this, it's very important that we had provisional measures ordered urgently.
Dr. Marco Longobardo, reader at the International Law at the University of Westminster. Thank you so much for sharing that legal expertise.
Thank you.
And joining us here in the studio is Middle East analyst Shani Rozanes. Shani, it was quite interesting actually to hear the reactions from Netanyahu, also the reactions from the South African attorney as well. Neither really seemed terribly satisfied with this ruling. Does that say something about it?
Yeah, the court managed an unbelievable nuanced decision that took only 10 days to achieve, to actually make each side win a little bit, but also lose a little bit. Israel is, in a way, happy for the fact that it was not forced to cease the fire. That was the main point that Israelis were looking at. Will they be forced, to halt the fire, having not gotten that measure is somewhat of a victory for Israel. But then at the same time, as we heard Netanyahu, the very fact that the court did not dismiss the charges, that it's saying there might be merit to the allegations of South Africa, that for itself is a blow for Israel. At the same time, we look at South Africa, look at the Palestinians, the South Africa as a voice for the Palestinians, finally feeling that they have a voice, that they are being seen, that there might be a chance to stop this war or to somehow give justice and protect the rights of the Palestinians for dignity, for freedom. And we've seen, the dire conditions in Gaza. So if you talk to people in Gaza, they hope that the court might finally give them some of the justice they've been waiting for over 100 days.
Let's just drill down for a second in what exactly the court is asking for. Here's just one aspect of it, and I'd like to just read it out. It says that Israel is required to prevent and punish the direct public incitement to commit genocide. It was really interesting to hear the court actually read out some, pretty prominent quotes from high-ranking politicians, including the Israeli president, the Minister of Defense, for example, essentially, to paraphrase, calling for the destruction of Gaza. Do you think that Israel's likely to abide by this particular aspect?
Well, interestingly enough, the Israeli judge, who's part of the 17 judges panel, was actually supportive of these measures. That was 16-1. The only one against it was the Ugandan one. So we also see within Israeli ranks, within Israeli society, those who are against those statements. And there's a lot of inner criticism of whether these there's a difference between what you say as a political pundit and what you say as your role as a political, also as a leader of the country. And we've seen that with Defense Minister Gallant, who already responded saying, I will not take lessons in morality from no one, especially not The Hague. But we do know that there's great support for the war. But at the same time, Israel is very attuned to criticism, international criticism, international community needs. And it's been willing to cooperate with this court, which it has not done before. So I believe they will take good listen and will examine the measures and will try to comply as much as they can.
How do you think Israel's allies are looking at today? Because, I mean, you know, we have heard the resounding message from the allies, which is Israel, of course, has a rights to its defense, a right to respond. But we've heard increasing criticism about how Israel has responded. There's a lot of distaste for the number of civilians who have been killed.
I'm sure there's a sigh of relief in the White House, for example, today, hearing this response of the court, these measures, because they've been pushing very much for more humanitarian aid for Israel to scale down its operations. Also in Europe, we've seen that. And miraculously, this court has managed to bring all sides, including China and Russia, US, France, and so many more other countries, to a unanimous vote on these measures. So the world very much wants to see less violence in Gaza. Israel is aware of the fact it cannot ignore the world anymore, and I'm sure we will be seeing it in the next weeks unfolding.
DW, Shani Rozanes, thank you.
You're welcome.